It's Friday, January the 27th, and I'm in Dunkeld at the home of Richard Heath, who's behind the camera, and helping me make this film, which is one of a series I've been doing, sharing with you some of my ideas about systematics, way of thinking developed by John Bennett from his work with Gurdjieff. This time I'm going to introduce you to a very particular symbol which was developed by Gurdjieff, called the Enneagram. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, I'm just going to show you what it looks like. And you see it's quite a remarkable appearance, fairly complex, but quite beautiful and elegant. And we're going to look into what it might mean for us. These systems or ideas are patterns of meaning which we can use to make sense of what we know, what we experience, and can do. Now, the particular focus of what the Enneagram addresses is something very important in our lives. I call it a completing process. Something which makes something happen, which creates something, which brings something into being, but also renews itself. So it's not only making a product, but renewing its capacity to make products. There are all sorts of things which come into this category. The basic way we're probably familiar with or can think about is that of any living organism. It is living, acting, producing results and manifestations while maintaining its own being and structure. So you picture perhaps the living cell or an organism as a possible model. Now, in human affairs, we do such things through technology and our culture. So we do such things as manufacture objects, we do such things as create plays, and all of that kind of thing which belong to us as conscious beings, but they still have that same character of a self-renewing, completing process. This is where we start from. Forgive me my very unelegant circle. Is just the bare idea of the completing process and the self-renewing process. So imagine that there is a flow which returns the apparatus back to its same state, so the same process can happen again. This is quite similar, in fact, to how we now picture living organisms as eddies of flow of energy. This sort of flow of energy comes back into itself, so within that flow of energy there is an inner life. Now this simple dot at the top here, that one item, represents, if you like, the identity of this process. Think of it as you will, as simply the name or the genetic code or whatever it is, but it's an identifier which makes it what it is. So here's the bare outline. This is what it is, this is what it encompasses, and we know there's a sort of circulation. Now in the systematics we have a very, perhaps it might seem to you first of all, very naive, very simple progression. You see, we start from thinking in terms of one, then we go on to thinking in terms of two. Okay. So now we add on to this picture a second point here. And we're going to add something else more in a minute. And what can this possibly mean? Well, there are many ways of reading such a simple picture, but I'm going to suggest one of them, as this is the intrinsic nature of what this whole is, this active living whole is? Well, this is the extrinsic nature. In other words, every living organism is made out of stuff which it gets from what's not itself. You know? It puts itself together out of we eat, we breathe, and we know ultimately our atoms have come from distant supernova stars. You know? But so there is that sense in which it's similar to being outer, similar to being inner, but these general conceptual words can't cover all the intricacies, all the possibilities of our actual experience. So forgive me if I use just provisional names for them, and hope to develop what these things mean in specific contexts. One form of this, one kind of labeling I want to put up into it, which refers us back more to human activity, where we have values and purposes in a more evident sense than we find in the external physical world. I want you to call this the actual and the ideal. Now these are qualitative words belonging to our human conceptions, but they do say something which is pretty universal. You know, we have the sense of an intrinsic as a pattern, which is roughly what we mean by an ideal, where everything really is fitting together, which absolutely corresponds, is in harmony. And we have the actuality, we're involved in the world, which accidents happen, processes meet, collide, and it's the realm of quantities, and it's the realm of temporal processes, and so on. And very probably I could take for granted you have some idea what it means in the difference between the ideal and the actual. And us as human beings are, in some sense, constantly poised between these two. Now then follows a sense, in my dotted line, of there being also two sides to the process. Because we have this arrow, and then this arrow, part of the circulation, and it leads to a prospect where we have both a movement like this and a symmetry, left and right, or an interchange, left and right. So, take account of this, put a horizontal part across, like that. And, imagine that within every living being there's a sort of pulse. The Stoic philosophers of Greece had this wonderful term, tonike kinesis, which means tensional motion. It's this inner vibration which keeps things alive and with capacity to meet challenges and evolve and so on. I'm going to revert to the human context more than the natural context. And again, these two can be given various appellations. I'm going to divide the two sides, left and right, into two aspects of our experience. I'm going to call it seeing and doing. There is that wonderful passage in, I believe it's one of the Vedas of India, which speaks about two birds yoked on the self-same tree. One sees but acts not. The other acts but doesn't see. So often these two are divided in us, separate from each other, but if you have a truly completing process, they meet together. Now, in some classical ideas from Greece and developments in Western philosophy, these two became identified, known as the theoretical and the practical. Now it so happens I've put them in the opposite sense to these items here. This is partly accidental, but also to recognize that it becomes a convention. And the convention is dependent on how you put this arrow. So this is a clockwise, and you look at things in a certain way. If it was the other way, you look at it in another way. Because clearly the theoretical, the word theo comes from seeing, vision. So it's the seeing part. The practice from praxis is the doing part. And now we see four realms which really merge into each other, because the seeing merges into the doing into the seeing, the actual into the ideal into the actual. So imagine not just four bits or something like that, but this merging of one thing into another. Counting, those are things 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're on to 3. We take our same circle, the same point at the top, but now we make not just dividing by 2 across here, but by 3. Remember previously I said dividing across here, but the division was right down the middle of the symmetry, but now we've got 3 phases into it, which makes it rather more interesting. Now what does this give us? It gives us the same process, which produces something, but also renews itself. This is in our bodies. We have to get food for energy and for rebuilding the proteins of our cells and all that kind of thing, to enable us to eat again, to move again, to reproduce, and so on. The circle now is depicted as moving in 3 phases. Now this punctuation of the process is very interesting. It says if we are going to make something, it isn't a continuous process. It's going to go through moments where we have to change gear or bring in something different. Now, this is not all of the same kind. So what this offers us is just that, what can be these different steps which happen? In drama, for example, there is the common pattern. Things coming to a crisis, and he's coming to a resolution. We know that in drama, but say in a process which might seem quite logical and worked out in scientific and technological, like manufacturing a motor car, there's a similar sorts of things. There are points where there is a point of hazard, and then dealing with it brings us to a point of resolution. When I say a point of resolution, you know there's a certain stage where something is made, and whatever happens, if it can't be unmade. It has to be what it is at that particular stage. Now, I mentioned symmetry. That symmetry between the left and right is still there. So we don't put it into the diagram as such, but always behind our minds is this sense of that same divide, and the divide between the 2 sides, which gives us a symmetry. Now I'm going to now take what has become a very classical example of how this applies, or how it can be applied, taken from the work of John Bennett, and one example he was very fond of, and which I developed in my own book about this, which is to do with that universal experience of cooking and the kitchen. He was very interested in the idea of the kitchen as a whole cosmos, and for many reasons, including the fact that it was a strong metaphor in Sufi writing for that of Rumi. He always talked about people becoming cooked, and this kind of metaphor. So, he spoke about it in terms of the kitchen, but I think we have to expand it to think about it in terms also of what the kitchen serves, which is a restaurant or a refectory. So in broad terms, looking at it, what will we look at? Well, we got here is to do with the kitchen itself, the apparatus. what goes on in terms of its bits and pieces. Here it has to do with the action with the food, which is the point of the whole exercise. And here it has to do with the people who are going to enjoy the food. Unless you have a kitchen, unless you have the food, unless you have the people, you don't have the making of a meal. Now this leads us to look at this picture, these simple lines here, not simply as lines like an exercise in geometry, but as vectors. You don't know what a vector means. It's a kind of line which has a direction to it. So it's like pointing, like a gesture, or like a command. This is what a vector is like. And really, this triangle, if you look at it in its own nature, that is a law of three, a pattern of threeness, is like a combination of three vectors. And they're like impulses or commands. And one vector can be called get food. Now, why has it arisen? Because people are hungry. So up here is something to do with hunger and satisfaction. Both because we start with hunger, we hope to achieve satisfaction. Now, this command working out here across this line is cook food. And the third one, getting up here, is of course, I'll speak it out if you can't see it on the camera, to serve. Okay. This triangle then is also signifying the law of the situation. You can't operate unless you get hold of some food, unless you do something to the food, unless you have some people to give the processed food to. Otherwise you don't get the meaning of a meal. So now we get the idea coming before us of this completing process is not monolithic, it's not all of the same kind. Different kinds of things are being brought together, and you can't achieve a meaningful result just by doing one thing. Nothing else happened. But to recapitulate a little bit, just to remind you that this is really to do with the kitchen, this is really to do with the chemistry, the biochemistry of the food, and this is to do with the world of people and their interactions, because if you think about a restaurant, what often becomes most important to the restaurant is such apparent trivialities, but they're not, about you go there to be seen by other people who are there. But at least you go for some kind of encounter with other people, and that's why you come together for the meal. It's not simply hunger, but something else which is cultural and social, and to do with the values which people have. Yeah. So now we look at this process and say a little bit more about it. It's more than the three phases, because we can then think about parts within each of these, which are reflections of these two sides. Remember, right at the top, we have this union, this meeting of where you began from and where you end, where the process ends. There's this lovely line of T.S. Eliot's to do with the fact of coming to where you started from and knowing it for the first time. It's a very profound insight of his, is about knowing, and I dare say to remind you about that previous perspective we had about seeing. You have to do something, but also see what you've done for it to be complete. And try and keep that in mind. Then down here, so the hunger, satisfaction. So what we have in these paired terms across here is a reflection of the two sides, one more to do with action and the other more to do with perception and consciousness, so to speak. Though these are relative terms. I'm going to put in some ideas about these, and I think you'll get the sense of them fairly easily. For example, you need to put this point here, the second one, and say it has to do with things like a menu. Menu, remember, is this thing written on a piece of paper. It belongs over here because all these things along here are material objects. Not living objects, and material objects. The pots and pans, the ovens, pieces of paper and all the rest of it. That's that word. The word ordinarily called thinking. Because thinking is really of the nature of material objects itself. Now over here you get actually the dishes. Recognize the complementarity. Here you have the menu, a list of words. Here you have the actual steaming, fragrant items being brought from the kitchen into the dining room. And so what was just a concept becomes a reality and has being here. And you can see that to get from here to here, something must be gone through. You've got to acquire, coat. These ideas have got to be coated with something, and of course this is from the food. The food enters here, the actual food. And what happens, you've got to take it from the pantry, take it from the refrigerator, bring it out on the table and start preparing it. So this is all the food preparation. It's all you can do with the food, to chop, clean, peel and rest on. So to prepare. Then, this side here, see the other side, is to finish. I say that particularly because you get into this process, see this is very much on the side of time. And I'll pause in a moment and say something more about this. It's the last minute touches to the meal, it's the sauces, the garnishes, and the presentation, which has to be done just at a particular time, not anything. Whereas the preparation can be done gradually, over an extended period of time, when you have various people can do it in various parts of the kitchen. Here it's all brought and focused into a critical time period. And it's also written in this way, to finish and prepare, because there is implicit in it this thing which we had in the previous stage of that actuality. And what is implicit here, not just spoken about, very critical for a kitchen, is fire. Yeah. Why is that important? Because this food, as soon as it comes in the realm of fire, is changed irreversibly. And it's also intriguing, those of you interested in symbolism and the history of symbolism, that in the circle, the cycle, this point is associated, I believe, and my friend here Richard knows more about it than I, with Agni, the god of fire. But let's go back to our story and say, well, you can see we get this balance between the two sides, and I rock my hand back and forth like this, a sense of balance, because this is what one needs to feel. As you feel that balancing going on, you don't get the sense of this completing whole. And these up here is the another kind of preparation, which is getting the kitchen ready and getting the people assembled. So I call it it's like simply making ready. Whereas here, this is where you get the meal. Now, why doesn't the meal be right at the top? Because there's something which goes off this picture, something completed off this picture. The meal is there at the table, is being eaten, but the story of its assimilation in the people begins here. So it enters into the body, becomes part of the body, and enters into their experience. So this is very simple. And what's the complement of the food coming in? Well, it's actually the food going out. That is towards the people world. So I'll put it there, and then towards the people. The only point, the difficulty of cooking for oneself is because it's incestuousness. It's better to cook for other people. And this world of people can be a totally different world. I say in a restaurant, we have this wonderful phenomena, and it's made a joke of in certain movies, of these swing doors where the waiters come out of and they go clunk and open up again. As the waiters pass through those doors, they are literally pass from one world into another world. And there are even plays been written about the whole drama going on in this world, and people are almost killing each other, but the silence, religious silence up here, or sometimes not silence, but you've got a cabaret show up here. You've got all sorts of nefarious things going on up here. Now this is a completing process, because what started here, making ready is of the kitchen. We know that eventually this kitchen has got to be restored back to its state to cook another meal. The food which is here starts a process, but it leaves the story of the restaurant, because the people going home are going to digest and assimilate this food that's going to enter into them, not only as proteins but also as memories. And so there's something that goes off here. Here, where the people have been gathered, and what's happened between them socially in their relationship is going to develop again in quite complex ways we know nothing about. And as you pass this threshold on the right side in this presentation to the left-hand side, it's also like going from the naively natural, just what nature is, into something more intentional. That is, you begin to value the food in terms of its appearance. That is expressing a certain ideology, even a culture. That sometimes it does. So the transition happening here is incredibly important. Now, remember in the previous diagram we simply had the top and the bottom and the circle, and then said there was some motion across the horizontal. Now that motion, that tensional motion, that interchange, has its reflection, has its presence here, but it's much more complex. And so imagine it, as we've been speaking, in terms of a weaving analogy. We're going to weave these worlds together. This idea of weaving or knotting is a very ancient one. For those who know it, it belongs to the system of Samkhya from India, where they talked about the three gunas of nature as ropes. And you weave these ropes together and you get the things that we know as organisms and natural phenomena. But here we're weaving it together intentionally, so it begins to look something like a cat's cradle. Now I draw it in for you. And it's given a certain sequence by convention. We label these 1, 2, these tend to go in this 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1 as a cycle. Now I'm going to explain a little bit about the cycle in a moment. In a moment, just say, let's look at this as a movement between these strands, almost as if you were taking threads up and beginning to cross them over and combine them. That is what makes it strong, viable, you see. As if you just imagine these things going around bit by bit, and there were different people doing these different things, it would be very hard to make it coherent. And of course it's the people who begin to merge these together, and chiefly the chief cook, who has to see this whole action going on. And now I will pause again and go back to a previous point about timing, and mention this about timing, point 5 here, because it has to be done at the right time, because the people have come and want their dinner. This is what makes urgency, and this is often the panic station. Anybody making a meal, all the things which have to belong to different processes happening at different rates have to be synchronized here. So the point of synchronization, we say, this is it, and the dish leaves our kitchen and goes out to the people. Now, how can we picture this weaving together? It's because one reason for it is to look at it in the following way. Not a reason, but one explanation for it. I said it goes in between 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1, and so on. Now imagine you see, we look about this in terms of starting. We say, well, this is like the starting point. But we needn't start from there at all. There's also a starting point, which is here. Now, in practice, this is very much the sort of thing which happens. Imagine making a meal, and where do you start from? You look what's in your cupboard. What can I make? You see? And that's where you start from. You don't start from setting the whole kitchen up and all the rest of it. You start by looking in your refrigerator. Now, let's go to the next one. You can start from the menu. Say, well, today I got these. Today I feel that I'm making chicken curry. You see, I'll look up the recipe for chicken curry. Now, then you start looking for the ingredients. What was that? To fit in that. And also take into account your skills and so on. And you can start from here. What is the occasion? Why are these people together? What would suit them? And what are they looking for? And so on. So in other words, the starting point can be anywhere in this. And of course, over time, if you can imagine a cook or a kitchen or restaurant for that matter, over time then all these different starting points are brought into play, because what you have is the overlay of repeated cycles of this process going on. And these repeated cycles produce the versatility, the skills, the learning and so on, which belong to that particular domain of work. And then it is a domain of work. So, think about them when you look at this diagram, and the end of this little film you'll see a sort of much more regular portrayal of this particular diagram, and begin to see it moving. This is the claim. People who, like Bennett, who worked with this diagram for a long period of time, talking to people about it, said there comes a time when in front of your eyes it actually moves. It isn't a flat thing at all. And you even find yourself seeing as if you were inside the thing, looking outwards, at phenomena and all the rest of it. And I use the metaphor just now of the cat's cradle, and you make these crossings of the string and so on. This weaving together, this concept of weaving is such an important one, and it is, as I gave in the Samkhya example, found in some very ancient ideas. And it is a very powerful and very useful metaphor for how we integrate. Integration can have a stark mathematical meaning, but here it is a substantial weaving together of strands and threads, in which strands and threads are kinds of motions, gestures, or actions. And now, coming to a close, I mentioned actions. You see, this is a complete action, which makes a whole. But each of these regions is itself a kind of action. So you have colors of action around here. And these are actually blending with each other, and they blend in certain harmonious ways. You produce a strong action. The action holds together, which means, what does it mean? It means you get a lovely result, beautiful meal, everybody is happy, and all that kind of thing. But you also sustain, and here we can even talk about the reputation. Right? If you look at a restaurant, it has a wonderful reputation, and its reputation is spreading and so on. And this has to do with cyclicity, with recurrence, the way in which whatever happens is brought into learning, where everything which might be in the linear process in time as it goes through the day or the cycle of the service of the meal, one thing after another, that the people in their experience begin to experience these things intimately together, which isn't just one thing after another, and it belongs to the wholeness of the action. So they're always in touch with the whole action at any moment. Now, just add 1 or 2 points about this, making it more speculative, if you like. But particularly to remind you that it's not a closed shop, it's not hermetically sealed. The food is coming in with all its immense history of development. The people are coming in from all their own history of development, you see. And then up the top you've got the chef and the staff and the management and so on, which are up here. You've got their own history, you see. And here it is, a realm, an arena of meeting where these exchange energies, they exchange information, or even exchanging their own being, and it produces a means of communication. So there's also certain results which come out, which for this restaurant are not inside it, but to which it contributes. And I'm thinking now of how this is, as it is applied to what Gurdjieff called the human factory, the human organism's digestion of food. He said, well, this is capable of producing inner bodies. He said, where are they? Well, they're not really in the cycle of digestion of the food. They're in these things which go, since we leave that particular story of the organism, and that's why they're called higher bodies. They may or may not arise, we don't know, because the story finishes here. So I hope I've given you some glimpse of the helpful insights woven into this Enneagram figure. It's there open to people, offering them a way of using their knowledge and experience to see things in a deeper way. You find your own kind of self-completing process, and you have interacted with people who are involved in safety in an industrial situation, with performers such as conjurers and magicians on the stage, or artists who make performances. And you can study this as part of an organism and its biology. You can do it in terms of the evolution of a species. But you find something you really know about, had the experience of, and seeing it in this way, you can see that what you was present in that action, which you yourself may have participated in, become quite skilled at, has some teaching, has some knowledge, has some substance, which you can better assimilate, which can really help you to understand the way in which anything works.